My name is Nancy Crampton Brophy. That's NancyCramptonBrophy.
You are a monster, and I am ashamed that I have to admit to my children that people like you walk amongst us, undetected, until the moment best serves to let narcissistic personality traits devolve into those of a full-blown sociopath.
Sorry.
How do you know you didn't go in the building?
I know I didn't go in the building because I didn't kill Dan. You know? I know that for a fact.
If you have known, you would agree that the critical moments that you've been asked about, your responses have been you don't remember.
Critical moments that I have been asked about. My response, I don't remember, is the most accurate thing I can tell you.
Right, but at the critical moments that you were there in the area, at the same time that someone happens to be shooting your husband within a 6-minute window with the exact type of gun that you own and is now mysteriously missing.
Let me tell you a story, and I think this kind of sums it up.
Woo! And a story she tells over and over and over and over again. Welcome back to the damn sofa, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well this morning, evening, or afternoon, whenever you're watching this you-know-what show. Don't forget to check out all the links from my other channels down in the descriptions below. Y'all, today we are going to be talking about another highly requested case here. And this is the case where at the center of it, we are dealing with a pretty vile narcissist, as we usually do in these type of cases. But this one has a penchant for writing, romantic novel writing, if you will, tawdry writing, in other words. She also has a penchant for going on and on and on and on and on the witness stand after she has taken her husband out, which is probably the only person on the face of this earth who is putting up with all of her BS. Now, before we dive in, let's go ahead and give a warm sofa welcome to today's sponsor. Y'all, we're headed into fall and it's time to get cozy with some of your favorite fall flavors. If you follow me for a while, then you know that fall is my favorite season and I can't wait to do it along with HelloFresh. So this week I ordered the veggie box again, and let me tell you what, it had all new recipes that I have not tried yet, and they were amazing. Melty double red pepper panini, black bean and green pepper flautas, and for today's meal, I tried the silky Sicilian penne. It's a Hall of Famer, and for all good reason, because it was amazing. HelloFresh is the first carbon neutral meal kit company, and nearly all the packaging is recyclable. And the recipes include pre-portioned ingredients. That means less prep for you and less wasted food. HelloFresh also cuts down on your food waste by at least 25% compared to grocery shopping. HelloFresh's streamlined supply chain reduces greenhouse gas emissions compared to grocery store shopping. Plus, in partnership with Plastic Bank, HelloFresh prevents 10 million bottles from entering the ocean every year. Not only are you eating good, but you're also doing the planet good. Every HelloFresh recipe includes ripe, just picked produce that travels from the farm to your door in less than a week. And I don't know about y'all, but that's one thing that I love about fall is just fresh garden vegetables, that kind of a thing. And HelloFresh does not disappoint in that department. So if you're like me and fall comes up and it's your jam, it's your season, a lot of busy stuff ends up going on and schedules get full, HelloFresh can make the weeknights so much easier. Y'all, the meals are foolproof, step-by-step recipes that are ready in about 30 minutes. But HelloFresh isn't just for dinners. Don't just limit it to that. Shop HelloFresh Market for quick breakfasts, wholesome snacks, and even desserts. You're going to find everything to satisfy your cravings without ever stepping foot in a grocery store or mini mart. HelloFresh offers veggie, pescatarian, and fit and wholesome meals to make it easy to stick to your goals. And the fit and wholesome recipes make it easy to eat well, so you don't have to sacrifice any of that flavor that you love, especially around this time of year. That way you can still eat good, like what you eat, and you can maintain your goals. And again, as I always say, you can easily customize your meals with HelloFresh by either swapping proteins or sides, upgrading to choice proteins, or even adding protein to a veggie meal. It's never been easier to eat your way. So like I said, it's fall and I absolutely love this kind of vibe, veggies, that type thing. So this is how much I'm into the fall weather and just eating food that goes along with it. I will end up like having a movie playlist of all the movies that I absolutely love, and I will end up matching them to meals so that I can like cook a meal, sit down and just have those like fall, autumn vibes and feel like I'm also having that on the plate that I'm eating, right? So for this meal in particular, I sat here and so truth be told, I had to cook this meal early in the morning to work around my work schedule. And so of course I'm going to sit here and eat it. And so I sat here and had some of it for breakfast. Y'all, I'm not going to lie. I ended up having more of it at lunchtime and then the rest of it for dinner while watching one of my favorite fall classics. It is such an amazing meal. When you order this kit, you have to also select this meal. It is so amazing and you're gonna love it. So go to HelloFresh.com and use code ReportingLiveFromMySofa16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. Go to HelloFresh.com and use code ReportingLiveFromMySofa16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. Okay, so be sure and check them out, y'all. All the links are down in the description below. So today we're going to be examining Nancy's time on the stand, some certain highlights from that, if you will, some of the closing arguments, and probably what was one of the most eloquently written victim impact statements I think I've ever heard in my life. You saw a snippet of it in the intro. Now, the way these videos work here on this channel, at least, is I will put clips up and then I'll make commentary on them and talk about them, that type of thing. So that's the way it's going to roll here. But before we do that, let's make sure we're all on the same page about who, what, when, and where with this case. Okay, so Daniel, also known as Dan Brophy, he was apparently an amazing chef, a culinary instructor, very beloved by his students, by his family, and by his community. And he also seemed to kind of be like a man of habit on certain levels, at least it would seem. So one morning, one of the very students that he taught at the Oregon Culinary Institute would end up being in the position of trying to save his life after finding him with 2 bullet wounds to the chest. Now, months later, Nancy, the wife, would be arrested for said crime. Now, y'all, there's surveillance footage, cell phone records, a money trail, gun purchases, you name it. All of that would help convict her. But none of that's going to slow Nancy down while she's on the stand. She'll just keep spinning her lies and her stories. And stories are a central part of this case. Besides Nancy being convicted for the alleged crimes, she's also a spinner of stories and also a self-proclaimed author, and also a self-proclaimed award-winning author, which we're going to look at here in a second. So in order to kind of paint the palette for the crazy that we're about to witness, we need to take a little bit of a look at some of these stories, these books she was writing, because she is also a master, apparently, of irony, whether that be intentional or unintentional. First of all, in 2011, she penned an essay titled How to Murder Your Husband. And as you can see, that didn't age well. It was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek piece, but yeah, you do the math on that one. Now, she also self-published a bunch of romance novels, suspense romance novels. And before we dive into the case, let's just take a look at some of those titles. Now, as we can see on her Amazon's author biography page, whatever you want to call it. First of all, if we look over here to her About section, she is an award-winning author, apparently, whose first published work was a pamphlet for the University of Houston. And let's just gander over here to some of these saucy titles. The Wrong Hero, The Wrong Lover, The Wrong Seal, The Wrong Husband, The Wrong Cop, The Wrong Brother. Interestingly enough, we have not seen a title called The Wrong Wife. Now, she's also known for her writing for some saucy zingers such as the following. Her white blonde hair was piled high on her head and allowed to descend in random ringlets. She was without a doubt the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. A magnetic personality that pulled at his core so powerfully he feared she would suck his soul from his body. I mean, it would suck his soul from his body. I don't know why I read that in a Blanche Devereaux voice, but I just felt it was necessary. Now, why is all of that tawdriness and whatnot important? Well, I'm going to tell you why. We have a woman who wrote an essay about how to kill your husband, who is a failed romance novel author, I guess you could say. An insurance saleswoman. Guess how many policies she had on him. You take all that up, and then you add the fact that the husband was killed with financial motivations, and you just do the math on all that. So on that note, let's start off with some clips of Miss Nancy while she's on the stand being questioned by her own attorney.
Had you ever met a guy anything like Dan Brophy before you met him?
No. He was unique.
Now, as you see from her demeanor while she's up there in the stand, she is very jovial, she's laughing. You almost feel like you're eavesdropping into, well, two cackling hens. I mean, they are laughing and giggling and going off. It's very weird, but often we see these kind of cringy performances when a witness is being questioned by their own attorney simply because they've set this up and this is how this goes, right? Now, also, Nancy is going to have you think that this was the perfect marriage, right? And maybe in her world it was, but clearly it didn't end up that way.
But the thing I probably liked the best about him, he loved me. And if that isn't a big number one item, I don't know what is, and I loved him back.
But apparently not enough to have financial motivations override said love. Now, we will learn on the stand through other witnesses, and especially through Dan's son when he gets up there to give his speech, his victim impact statement. We will learn that probably she was, I don't know what you call this other than like a narcissist, but a sponge. I'm sure Dan did love her and showered her with whatever she wanted, and she took advantage of that.
I'm sorry to say I lost the direction I was going there.
Okay,
I'm
let me
so
ask you
sorry.
this.
I was supposed to be paying attention, but I
Let me
went
stop
off.
you.
Now brace yourself for this, because when I tell you that she set up here, and I think her motivation was, if I talk everyone to death and put them to sleep, they'll just forget we're here. You could ask her, is the sky blue? And she will have a story for it and forget what she's talking about halfway through.
As someone said earlier, I'm a chatter, and I don't remember who said that, but I am a chatter, and I can just start running. And I never met a rabbit hole I didn't like. And there were times that Dan would come out, and he would be so subtle, and he would make this little move, and I knew I needed to calm down, back up, because he was trying to help me not run away with things.
Let me back you up.
Oh, sorry.
This move.
And actually he did it. He did it with this hand because it was a C for chill. And it was real calm. If you were standing next to him, you wouldn't have noticed it. But I was looking at him, I knew exactly what he meant.
I mean, honestly, you would forget that she's on trial for murder, okay? I mean, it's just like, my God. But also, he did that movement. He probably wore, bless his heart, spots off on his face from doing that. Imagine her at a company Christmas party. Would probably talk him and her out of a damn job in 5 minutes flat. And at least she is admitting this much on the stand, that yes, she's a chatter, yes, she gets carried away, and yes, she doesn't know how to shut up. Poor Dan.
What's it like to be without him now?
It's like you've lost an arm, like you're just not as good as you were when you were with him. You were the best you could be when you were together with him. And now it's like, yeah, I function, but there's something missing.
Well, she should have thought about that before she forgot what she was doing that morning and ended up taking his life. I love it when you see these people, and these people, I mean these narcissists, these criminals who, take their spouses or other innocent lives, and then when they get caught for it and they're on the stand, this is what they regret, right? Because they weren't regretting this when they built up this whole plan to do this, right? And they get up there and they produce the tears and this, and I do think that there's a shred of them looking back, but it's not that they miss that person, it's that they now realize, I got caught and this is my life now, so I wish that I had not done this so things could be the same, right? And clearly we see this with Nancy. We'll see evidence throughout this, and she contradicts herself in the stand between the cross-examination and this and so on and so forth of, again, there probably was some form of love there, but I don't think it was as genuine and authentic as she would like it to you to think. And I'm sure for her, she did rely on Dan. She is missing a part of herself. Someone who probably buffered her life to create this delusion that she lived in.
Between the two of you, did you know how to run a business?
I did.
Did he know how to run a business?
It was a learning thing, and he learned with me as we went along.
And between the two of you, did you know how to run a household?
I did.
Now here we get into the little slips of the mask and the real Nancy coming out. This is a prime example here. Notice her defense attorney says, between the two of you, did you know how to run a business? I did. Doesn't even think about it. That's her first thing. And then when she asked about Dan, instead of even, you would think that the natural response would be, he did. He did. This is someone whose life is gone. Let him have that, and it's past in this state, right? But no, what did she say? It was a learning lesson. He learned along with me. That's a very passive, aggressive way of saying no. Then between the two of you, did you know how to run a household? I did. Doesn't even throw him in there. So this is the thing where you can see she thinks very highly of herself. She knew how to run the business. She knew how to run the household. But as we'll see in the evidence shows, this is probably somebody who just sits around and does a whole bunch of nothing. But aren't those always the type that think that they are the ones running everything when really it's usually quite the opposite?
Financially, did things just kind of go off the tracks for you and Dan somewhere between 2014 and 2017?
Yes, they did. It was a series of things happened that all came together at the wrong moment.
Now, a big central part to this case is going to be finances, and we're going to hear some of this. And now, whether you watch this trial in full or you're just seeing these clips, you've seen pieces of it, y'all, her testimony hours and hours and days and days. And again, using her words, unfortunately, the rabbit holes they go down on finances and insurance and all that kind of stuff, it's very difficult to say what we're going to cut out and clip out because, it could be hours worth of clips you could watch and it doesn't even scratch the surface, okay? But suffice it to say there was financial stuff going on, right? And we're going to hear the finagling that she does and the this and the that. And keep in mind that this is also someone who claims that she's not really that much of a planner, she kind of goes by on one side of her mouth, she is, this, I go by the seat of my pants, I just jump into something, I'm not a planner, Dan was the planner. But then when you listen to her stories, it's like, well, you sound like you're very much a planner and doing all this stuff. So what's the truth? And again, like most things, no one's probably going to ever really know the true truth if you're just listening to what is coming from Nancy's mouth.
As you were looking at 65, did you want out of selling life insurance?
I did. And that was even more emphasized by the fact when I was having eye surgery.
I'm going to bring you back to that.
I know, but I couldn't work. And all of a sudden, when you can't work, you suddenly realize there's no income coming in.
Okay.
Now, like I said earlier, Nancy sold insurance. And again, if you watch this whole thing, you will learn so much more about insurance. Literally, I was just like, my God, they could use some of this footage as a training video, for God's sakes. But you're going to hear all the finagling that went on with insurance. And again, for someone who was kind of fly by the seat of the pants at times, this is just like, what?
Dan said, you know what we could do? Because part of the problem thing was we talked about subdividing the property, which would make it more valuable. And Dan said, we could live on the back half and get two tiny houses. One I could have and have my stuff everywhere in it, and one that was tidy that you would want to live in. And I thought, Dan, you can't live in a 4-bedroom house. You certainly can't live in a tiny house.
Now, another thing that went on is this whole subdividing of the property that they had. This was going to allegedly be something that they did to retirement and that type of thing. But evidence will show this was just an idea that was scratched upon. People she said that she looked into this with, she never did. Lots of lies will be unearthed about this. But again, she will sell you the story like it was this thing. They had done all this work about it, all this research. And this is a central theme of Nancy. She is a storyteller. Oh, poor one at that. But this is one of the examples here of she took a little kernel of truth and just expanded it into something, assuming no one would really look into what she was saying. And when they did, it didn't hold up.
Did you have some Band-Aid solutions?
Yes, I did. The first year was easy to fix. The first year was a very small amount of money. And what we did was I wrote a life insurance policy on Dan, which immediately brought in a couple of $1,000. The next thing I did was I borrowed money from an interest-free account that we had life insurance in, and that brought in enough money to get our house payments made, and it didn't cost us anything.
Now, one thing that you'll notice in this is that Nancy is a master at having an excuse for everything. And so she'll tell the story, and if you just were to isolate this and listen to it without scratching beneath it, talking to other people involved, all that stuff, you would be like, wow, these are really resourceful people here, especially Miss Nancy. You know, that's really smart to take out the insurance on Dan to get the commission type of a situation. It doesn't matter what they throw at her, she can come up with a reasoning for it. And obviously that's the entire extent of keeping her on the stand and having her lawyer question her for hours, because there's lots of stuff that she needs to come up with an excuse for.
I want to kind of jump back in time because I can go down rabbit holes too. I want to talk to you
I've
about.
trained you well.
I want to talk to you about.
The laugh is evil, okay? It's so evil. And the lawyer, I can go down rabbit holes too. You know, and I'm just like, y'all, where are we at? Where are we at? Y'all ladies go have lunch somewhere and go feed the pigeons or something, right? I'm just like, my God, it runs all over me.
And then you were actually lucky enough to get them to say, yeah, I'll buy that policy.
I'd like to think there was more skill than luck in that, but
Okay,
yes.
all right. But you sell the policy and
Again, the mask slips off. Now, what the lawyer is talking about, and the lawyer's trying to toss Nancy a softball, if you will. And she's adding all this up and being like, well, if you were lucky enough for them to do this and lucky enough for this to happen, they would do the policy to make it look like it was so incredibly difficult to do this whole insurance thing she was doing and get these commissions and how hard money was and all this type of stuff. But here's little Miss Nancy. No, I think it takes a little more skill than that. A narcissist is going to always narcissist, right? She can't let something like that go, even on the stand where she's fighting for her damn life, okay? She's going to have to take credit where she thinks credit is due.
You sit there at the kiosk, and if somebody walks by and says, you know, my mother-in-law's on this, you can start a conversation. And as you can see, when I told you I was chatty, I'm chatty. This is an ideal situation for me. People walk by and they chat, and sometimes we talk about books, sometimes we talk about other things.
Aim damn in. You know she loved the hell out of that. She would have been good at one of those kiosks, you know, in the mall when you walk by and the girls are like, would you like some free, you know, whatever, moisturizer or hair stuff or whatever, and they all but like assault you in the mall. They should have gotten her for it, right? But yes, Nancy is admitting, I like to talk. We do this. You know, the people signed up for the stuff because they probably forgot why they were talking to her after an hour or two, right? There's that. But again, she's going to this whole scheme of, oh, we would go to the kiosk, we would do this, I would talk, you know, she has these kitschy, cute little stories for everything.
And now you started on down a rabbit hole, and I can't remember which rabbit hole I stopped you from going down.
We were talking about what was the plan.
Again, the cackling. I can't with it. And again, the rabbit holes. They just go on this like it's something funny. And they're literally, you know, the jury had to have been over this, right? You're taking up people's time and you're sitting up here cackling like two old friends that have gotten together, and it's just like, girl, get the information out, spit it out. But the one silver lining about this is because they let her go on, she just digs her hole deeper and deeper because she divulges so much information that the prosecution will be able to utilize this against her. Now, here's the thing, and this is again like a good lesson, and you know, if you ever find yourself on a stand doing something like this, or say you're representing somebody or whatever, for me, my opinion is, it is better to keep everything down to yes, no, boom, boom, boom. Because in this particular scenario, we see it where Nancy talks herself into the damn jail. Now, obviously, you know, they found her guilty not just on talking herself into it, but her actions, her omissions, her testimony, all that kind of stuff. So to me, I don't think that her attorney did her any favors by just letting her get up there and go on and on and on and on, because then the prosecution would keep her in line a little bit more, but they would also do the same thing because she would contradict so much of her testimony, because you can't keep up with all this stuff. If you were her, you cannot keep up with all the stuff that comes out of your mouth, probably in a damn hour span, certainly over hours on the stand in a trial like this.
And how many landscapers did you contact?
3 total.
Okay. What were the answers?
No, and oh, wow, yeah.
I'm guessing, but who was, oh, wow, yeah?
That was Mr. Denny.
Okay.
Now, also, one thing I think is interesting is just how much fun she's having up there. Again, you would forget why we're even here in the first place. She is basking in this attention. It's like she's waited her whole life for this. She is, you know how you run into people where they're never paying attention to anything really going on around them, but they are just looking for cues to go into these stories that they have, these pre-done stories and expressions and things like that. She is this person. She is loving this attention, and she can't contain herself. She's literally up there laughing out loud throughout this, having a blast.
After you and Dan married, did you buy insurance to protect the two of you?
I did. We were doing our first trip overseas. We were going to the Orient, and before we left, we did our wills and we bought insurance.
Now, again, she's going to have excuses for everything. They are going to attempt to line up why all this insurance, right? She'll have an excuse for each and every damn policy and all this kind of stuff, but they're also trying to pivot it to look like to make it like we each have the same amount of insurance. This is not odd. This is not whatever, right? And in normal situations, this could very well be true, right? One thing that works against her, in my opinion, too, is even though they're trying to be like, well, no, look, we made it fair, we all had the same insurance, because she knows so much about insurance and sells insurance and does all this stuff, it's just like, yeah, she knew how to wheel and deal this. I mean, you already heard her say the thing, well, I sold a policy to get a $2,000 commission so we could do this. She's a little grifter, you know what I'm saying? And she found this Dan guy who sounds like a very stand-up kind of dude, whatever. Who knows what it was about her, and her son will say the same damn thing, and we'll listen to that in a minute, as to what he kept going, kept this going with her for, right? But she rang his bell on some level. But she was probably grifting the whole time. If you look at all the little stuff she's pulling up here and all this and that, Lord knows what she was doing behind Dan's back when he was alive. There's just no telling.
We had earlier, what's the dearest? We had earlier talked about the Dearest Dan letter, and I wanted to pull that up again and ask you about a part of that.
Okay.
Now, the Dearest Dan letter, I mean, they just pivot everything. This is a letter that she wrote Dan when she was going to be going under kind of a thing. And so it was like, in case I don't come back and da-da-da-da-da, and like, this is where this is and this is where that is and this is how you run the house and so, yeah.
There in the middle of the page, it says the 23rd, $266, Americo.
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about there?
That is a policy that we bought for Dan and scrambled to get it to him on time when he was 59 and a half, because after that point, he couldn't get it anymore. And that's
a policy that insured Dan's life.
That's right.
But this is a letter that talks about the policies that insure your life.
That's true.
Why are you telling Dan about this policy on his life that costs $266 a month?
Because it's a special type of policy that's also part of our retirement planning. So it is a policy that we got that if I wasn't there to remind him, I wasn't sure he would remember what our plan was. But basically what happens on return of premium is you pay the premiums, and if Dan doesn't die, which was our plan, we get all the money back for the premium. So once again, this is another forced savings account for it.
Now, she'll talk about these forced savings account situations like this one right here that we see. And part of me, so I'll have to say this, part of me was like, I can get where she's coming from on this. If you're not a saver and you're doing something like this, because essentially what she's saying is they weren't savers and they spent all their money, so this forced them to save the money. So I view this two different ways. Number one, if you're not a saver and you do this, it's like, oh, well, you're getting kind of like a couple of different things. There's this policy, but then you'll get all your money back later and it's forcing you to do it, right? There's that. That all sounds nice and pretty on the outside. But then if you peel it away also, it's like, well, okay, so then why not sit here and say, and again, I mean, I'm just looking at, well, isn't there some kind of a savings account that you could do? But if the argument is, well, we're not savers, we wouldn't do it unless we were forced to. The math doesn't math on it for me personally. And again, Dan, unfortunately, is not here to speak for himself. And that is who I think would hold the key to some of these like murky answers and things like this is Dan. Because something doesn't really add up with the whole thing there, right? And again, her little letter there, it's like all cute and dandy and all this. Well, if you start looking at the premiums that they're paying on stuff, right, you're just kind of like, I mean, you have so many insurance policies and all this stuff that you're paying out for these things, but you're in financial, you know what I'm saying, like issues. You know, can we add those two things together and come up with a solution? Clearly Nancy did, but it wasn't the one that everybody else wanted.
Okay. You heard the testimony of our insurance expert.
Right?
And he said that you paid between 3 times and 6 times the premium each month that you could have paid for a simpler $100,000 term policy on Dan's life.
That's right.
So this is a premium that costs you between 3 and 6 times as much,
Yes.
but you pay it. What are you betting when you pay that?
I'm betting Dan will live and we get the money.
How long does Dan have to live for you to get the money?
20 years.
Now, the reason I put this one clip up there is, number one, so you can hear that I'm betting that Dan's going to live for 20 years. They're trying to make it look like, well, we were planning on this, and none of this was planned, and da-da-da-da-da. Evidence will show, you know, of course, within days, she's calling up trying to get these premiums cash, you know, these plans cashed out and all this kind of stuff. And we're going to hear some even more shadier stuff about what she's claiming that, like, one of them told her to do and all this kind of stuff and whatnot. But also during this is listen to the way that she speaks. Number one, just about, I guess, you know, part of me is like, okay, because she is an insurance salesperson, she knows this kind of stuff, but it's also so odd to hear her talk about like, oh, we're betting that Dan's gonna live and we're betting this and that kind of thing. Also, key note is when the attorney said that you heard from our insurance experts, the prosecution will bring this out talking about these insurance people, they got the information from Nancy. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are paid for experts. Like, we know how that goes a lot of times. So, again, this is just fluffed up evidence.
Now, we already talked about another policy that you took out that did create an inequality in this.
Right?
And that policy was the one that, the policy that you took out in November of 2016 when you needed a commission
Right?
to cover some cash flow issues that you were having.
Mm-hmm.
And you needed the money quick.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in November of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how after all this they slide that part in. Well, actually, the one that made the policies unequal was this one that you did for cash flow problems because you needed that commission, so you took out this policy on him. Oh, okay. Not only did she make a commission off of it, but she was also banking and probably cashing out the insurance money. Because here's the thing, if you're over the years, and who knows at like really truly what point like this plan started or whatever, but if you and a spouse are collecting insurance on one another constantly, and it's equal and all that stuff, well, of course you're going to want to make it equal so that, like, say if in your mind you're like, well, I'm just going to take them out if things get bad. You know what I'm saying? And so maybe at that point she was like, well, hey, let's go ahead and do this or whatever. Well, you can always just do that and then cancel the ones on yourself at the end of it, you know, to be like, oh, you know, job done. Here we go. Let's move along.
You're a romance writer.
Yes, I am.
What kind of stuff do you write?
Romantic suspense.
Woo, Mama Jama. Yes, she is. And now we will get into some of the writing conversation. Buckle those seatbelts.
And we've heard from some of the other writers about writing devices or things that writers use to write their books. What kind of writing devices have you used in the past, or have you bought?
Bought or traded. For a while, I loaned some money to one of my employees, and then what I held in as their collateral was a pair of night vision goggles. I thought I got the better deal on that, real frankly, but he did come up with the money, and I had to give them back.
Did those night vision goggles make it into, or whatever we call them, night vision?
Oh, yeah.
Did they make it into one of your books?
Oh, yeah.
You would think she was the next damn Hemingway, the way she talks about her writing stuff. The prosecution and her stepson will tear that to shreds on the stand, though. But listening up here, again, what kind of writer devices are in your toolbox? She knows all the kitschy little words. Remember, she is self-published. That's where this begins and ends, right? In tawdry, cheap self-publishing, that she will try and explain away as to why her books don't sell when the prosecution takes a stand. But also, again, her defense is laying out the story for a huge part of this. Why she has the guns, okay, and why one of them is missing. That is the one that is alleged to be what took Dan's life. Very convenient, right? And so, of course, she's going to start, well, I took the night vision goggles, which when she said, I loaned an employee some money and for collateral, and it just sounds so weird. I'm like, well, how much money was this? And like, it's just so weird that you took collateral from them, which, I mean, hey, I get, right? But it just sounds, it sounds so odd to me, where I'm just like, what? I mean, this, okay. And then, well, yeah, I made it in the book. Yeah, I made it in the book. So let's continue.
What other kinds of things have you either purchased?
Well, we had expensive handcuffs. We had.
I bet she did.
What else have I bought? Oh, man.
What about binoculars?
Oh, yeah. We have a really nice set of binoculars, which started out as a writing tool, and as I moved on, they became a tool we held on to.
Okay.
Now, some of the stuff, again, she's just, it's so cringy. Those were a writing tool that we kept on, and we kept that tool. It's a pair of damn binoculars, girl. Like, they can throw anything. You could sit here and come up with anything that you want to and throw it at this and call it a damn writing tool, right? She's writing smut, number one, okay? She acts like it's like the next greatest damn thing out there. She's writing smut, poorly written smut. And so to make all these claims like this, to build up then to as to the reasonings as to why she has all these different guns. One of them, a gun kit that you buy to put together, okay? I mean, this is an absolute absurdity that she's even trying to play this off.
A lot of people plot more than I do. But what I do is I sit down and I like to have the story start to formulate. I like to know who all the characters are. I like to know what's known as GMC, goals, motivation, and conflict are. I like to work that through in my mind long before I put a pencil to a paper, or in my case, fingers to a keyboard.
Now, again, she's starting off here talking about what her writing process is and all this kind of stuff. And again, this is the kind of testimony that just, when you have people who do this kind of stuff, or who think that they do in her case, and then they get up there and they have a story for every single thing, you can already tell that she is writing stories in her mind for excuses for things, right? And so this whole plotting and all this, she's had time to sit here and connect all the dots in her world. Everything has a perfect reasoning behind it, because most of it is made up.
I want to shift again and talk about firearms.
Okay.
In 2017, did the seed of a new story come to you?
It did.
And how did that come to be?
Now here we get into a huge part of this. The story that required, and we'll hear like what the plot line is for it and whatnot, but a story that is going to require buying gun pieces to put a gun together from different various pieces. Yeah. We can go ahead and probably start thinking that this is around the time that she began formulating the idea to take Dan out.
I read an article about a guy in California who bought a gun online, put it together, and killed his family.
So, as you see, I mean, the bing, bing, bing went off in her head, I'm sure. Like, oh, this is how you can do it. You can build a gun that, like, can't be traced. Oh, my God.
Sometime in November of 2017. Is that the article that you're talking about?
Yes.
And the links that you're talking about, do you remember what they were to?
One was to ghostguns.com and one was to Ghost Gunner, something. There was another similar title to it.
Okay.
Ghostguns.com. I mean, I was scared to go to it on my own damn computer. You know what I'm saying? I'm just like, that just sounds shady. Not Miss Nancy. She visited it numerous times before she decided to make a purchase.
What I really thought is, when I was thinking about it, was that you would buy pieces one place or another. Maybe gun shops had them. Maybe gun show people. Maybe you bought them online. But I was thinking there's got to be these pieces available where you could put a gun together. And then, lo and behold, there are kits. You don't have to go and shop everywhere.
Okay.
You just
Okay. Again, I mean, kudos to her for trying to play this off, right? Because, I mean, this took some, you know, thinking skills here to cook this one up, right? But wow, I mean, it's just, and again, I get that she's trying to save her own tail and whatnot, but the whole thing, I'm just like, really? Like, you're going to do this much depth and research and putting a gun together and doing all this, like, and then get up here and try and play this off to the jury and his family that this is legitimately why you're doing this. Gotcha.
Okay, so you looked in November of 2017 at this site.
right.
Did you buy a gun kit?
I did.
No, in November. Did you buy a gun kit?
Oh, I didn't buy a gun kit then. No,
Okay.
I went back and forth on buying the gun kit.
How many times do you think you went to that site before you bought a gun kit?
Oh,
If
I'll
you
bet
remember.
7 to 10.
Really?
7 to 10 times on ghostgun.com. I mean, you know, okay. Gotcha, Nancy. What else you got up your sleeve there?
That's where we ended up.
So you bought the gun kit
I did,
as a gift to yourself?
as a gift to myself.
And she probably thought it was going to be the gift that kept on giving, right? I mean, she was like, well, my God, this little whatever $100 investment is going to bring me so much more. Now, she also has to play off the fact that they also had a regular firearm. Now, Nancy will say on the stand in so many ways that basically she leans left politically. They used to be anti-gun, but, you know, the world's crazy. All these bad things are happening. Schools are getting shot up, all this kind of stuff, right? And then this will be another part of Dan goes out mushroom hunting. People can be territorial for this, you know, so on and so forth. And so they just got to the point where it was like, we need to have a gun, right? There's a lot, like I said, in this case, there's lots of things that you have to stop along the way to make an excuse up for. And everything has a long, tangled excuse. Nothing is straightforward.
February 14th was the Florida shooting, and it was a shooting in a school, and it seemed not worse than other shootings, but kind of worse in some ways. It got a lot of publicity that on top of the other shootings that had been in the area at the time. I mean, there was the Las Vegas shooting. There were, you know, we were just killing too damn many kids. And
So,
and I reached the point where I said, Dan, it's time. And he said, okay.
Again, we have to do the ceremonial. Let's get choked up and, you know, do some tears over the, you know, acceptable things of, we're talking about that. She's, you know, just up here portraying a character like in one of her little cheap dime store novels that she does.
did you then do some research online?
I did.
Did you research how much a Glock would cost?
Yes,
Did you research gun safety classes?
I did.
Did you research the Portland Expo gun show?
I did.
So now again, remember earlier she talks about like, oh, you can get these pieces from here and there and da-da-da-da-da. Now, obviously she's going to have to come up with excuses as to why she went and got, you know, went to the gun shows, did all this gun research. I mean, there's so much gun research to be done. And again, I can 100% understand from a normal writer they would be doing this kind of stuff. To the level that she's taken it to, and then obviously when we see the outcome, it's just not buyable or believable from her, right?
And why the Portland Expo gun show?
Well, everybody told me that it's cheaper. Go to a gun show, they'll negotiate, buy a gun there.
And that's what she would do, but unfortunately for her, what she didn't understand or know is that she ended up just buying a gun from a gun store that was very close to her house. They were just there and had a booth.
You remember putting pants on or tights on.
Right?
Do you remember anything else from that morning?
No. The next thing I remember from that morning is the phone ringing and it being Maxine.
And that's Maxine Borcherding.
Yes, it is.
We heard from her earlier in the trial.
We did.
And where were you when Maxine called?
I was in bed writing.
Now we've made it to the morning of the incident. Now, another issue for Nancy is the evidence, right? So there is cell phone evidence, video evidence, photographic evidence, all this kind of stuff that she was driving her van near the scene of the crime. Now they go through all the rigmaroles of like, well, I usually go to Starbucks, you know, and all this crazy stuff or whatever. And we'll hear here momentarily where there's really nothing she can say about the evidence that puts her there. So her mind just goes a blank during those times.
What did Maxine have to say?
She said, do you know what's going on at the school? And I said, no, what? And she told me about the fact that Potluck in the Park had called her and there was some sort of police interaction going on down there.
Now this is the time where she learns that something's up at the school, there's this going on, so on and so forth, and it will be alleged that Maxine has to kind of nudge her to be like, you need to go down to the school eventually, right? Because she can't get a hold of Dan. She knows she's not going to get a hold of Dan, but she can't say that outright, right? Because it is what it is. She knows what's happened to him.
And I texted him, because usually he's better at texting, particularly when he's got a class going on, and he didn't respond. And I talked to Maxine and said, I don't think I'm going down there, because you know how you can hear your husband laughing in your mind where you're saying, yes, I came down to rescue you. And he's going, what are you thinking? If it had been a problem, I would have called you. You know this. And so I'm hearing this in the back of my mind. But at the same time, I'm worried that this text message is going unanswered and there's police there. You know, this is not looking good. So
At some point before you called your mother-in-law, did you have any information about any more details about what was going on at the school?
Now, this obviously, like I was talking about, this is her trying to explain away why she wasn't going to go down to the school at first, right? So there's that. Let's continue.
Can you find Dan?
no, and he would have been with those guys. These guys were his friends. And I know he would have been there and he wasn't there. And that worried me a lot. Just a minute. Hold on. Anyway.
So clearly now she's going down to the school. She's seeing there's commotion. People are acting weird around her. She's not seeing Dan with his usual people. We're putting on crocodile tears. We're acting like we're very upset over this at this time. And let's keep watching.
This worries me that I'm seeing all these people who know him. It worries me that every time I look at the people who know me, they're not looking at me. They're looking down. They're looking away. And I'm thinking, this isn't good.
What happens then?
How odd that she would be there. I would have loved to have seen exactly what her behavior was like, because it was alleged that there was, this... The behavior didn't match what it should, and she's going to talk about that in a second, and we'll talk about what she talks about too. Because here she's portraying, of course, the distraught wife. She was probably very nervous because she knows what she did, right? And now she's right back there at the scene of the crime. And so she's probably scared out of her mind. I know I would be.
Well, in the lighter moments, I thought it was karma kicking me in the ass. But in the heavier moments, I thought, we own a gun and it didn't protect us. We bought a gun to protect us and it didn't do its job. Job, sorry.
You told the police that.
Wait, I need to wait just a
Sure,
minute.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm me.
I mean, come on. Notice that she's trying to align, and this is just my opinion here, she is trying to align this with almost like random school violence or something, right? Where she's like, she's already done the whole part about like, you know, all these school shootings and this and that, and then she's like, we bought a gun to protect us, but it didn't work or whatever. And I'm just like, I'm just like, I can't, I would not, I don't care if you're innocent, guilty, whatever, I would not be going this route of like, we're victims, look at this, and mostly, obviously, poor Dan is, but she's trying to align it with herself, because it's just like, honey, you have to know that there's going to be people out there that think you did this, right? Possibly on the jury, and you're sitting here trying to make it like, we bought a gun, we did all the things right, and it didn't save us. You know, look at the irony of that. That's karma. And it's just like, it doesn't count when you're part of the karma that caused this by taking your husband out. I mean, I can't with this woman.
Okay.
You told the police that you thought the gun was ugly.
I think at that moment I'd never hated that gun more than I ever did. In that
Told the police that you were embarrassed to have bought the gun.
I was.
You told the police that you decided you really weren't gun people.
Yes.
Were you embarrassed at that point by gun ownership?
Yes, I was. I was embarrassed that we had a gun and it was at home and Dan was dead. You know. And I think embarrassed is only one of the emotions I was feeling at that moment.
I mean, why even say that? I mean, it's so performative, right? And then she slides that in. I think embarrassed was one of the only emotions I was feeling. That's what's on your mind during all this time, is that, God, I'm embarrassed over gun ownership. We should have never done this. What's really going on is she's trying to spin something. She was already trying to spin this, right? And in her mind, she probably is the type person that plays these victim things in any situation she's in to get what she wants. Because if she wants, she can play out the little old woman role, right? Like, this is what she's clearly doing. And so she's getting out there playing that. She probably gets her way with it. And then, you know, the bug stopped here in regards to this case.
I'd never had a client who had been murdered. I had no idea. But when I talked to the insurance agents, the insurance companies, because you call them and you say, I need to set up a claim, and they ask you questions, I immediately began to realize it was going to be, this was not going to be a quick payout by any wild stretch of the imagination.
You 100% know that she already knew this. She already knew this. If she does any research at all, and these are the things that don't add up with her, that she's trying to play off, is like, again, one side of her mouth that's, well, you know, we've researched this book, and I went all the extent of like buying guns and doing this and doing that and blah, 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 blah. You cannot tell me that she does not know how policies work and all this kind of stuff. So that probably worked to her benefit too, right? Because she was obviously clearly trying to orchestrate like a very innocent looking type situation here. So this whole conversation about like, oh, I called them and then it turns out this was going to take a long time and da-da-da-da-da. You know, she's thinking it's making it look like, well, why would she do this? She wasn't going to get a payout earlier. Let her go and apologize to the poor little lady.
Did one of the insurance companies tell you that you should call the police to get a letter of exoneration?
They did. That was Forrester's.
Before you made that call, did you talk to your sister?
I did.
Is your sister a lawyer?
Yes, she is.
And when you told her that's what the insurance company had told you to do, what was her reaction?
It was strictly humor. She said, yeah, that'll be happening. You know, that's kind of sarcasm that runs in our family anyway, where they were saying,
So now this is one of the icing on the cakes here. So she calls Forsher's Insurance, and they say that she needs to call the police and get a letter of exoneration. So then she calls her lawyer, attorney, sister, whatever, who jokes around, yeah, that'll be happening or whatever. The fact that she did it, just like, I cannot with her. It's like, you would have thought, it's like the work she put into this, it's like, is it worth it? I mean, my God, this poor guy, God only knows how she tortured him on a daily basis with her absolute ridiculous personality. I mean, it's just, I can only imagine she was an absolute horrifying person to live with.
Did you learn that the police had video, or were you told that the police had video of you driving in Beaverton?
Yes.
Did that surprise you?
No, I could believe that.
Okay. Did they tell you that they had video of you near the murder scene?
Yes.
Did you believe that was true?
Not for 1 second. I thought, they're making this up. This isn't true.
Now, here again, we've talked about this already, but here you're starting to hear the evidence of the evidence. You're starting to hear the discussions about what the evidence they had. Notice that little slip, all these little slips that come through of her personality. When she did that jaw down, not 1 second, that evil look on her, she instantly switched like that. That's the person that Dan probably lived with, right? That's the real Nancy, and then that little snort that she did, but I snort too a lot of times, but it's just all fitting here. But I just thought that little character slip of like, oh, there's the real Nancy again. And she lets the real Nancy slip out here and there. These narcissist, crazy people always do.
So shortly after your arrest, were you represented by a lawyer named Katie Dunn?
I was.
And at some point, did Ms. Dunn come to show you some of the evidence in the case?
She did.
And did she show you a photograph that kind of shook you to your core?
She showed me a photograph of what looked like my van and what looked like me in it and what looked like me in clothes I recognized,
What
which
do you mean
was
clothes you recognize?
that nightshirt that we've talked about, the nubbly black one with the white lace applique. And I was obviously somewhere near the school. I can't remember if the backdrop was Bellagio's or whatever. I wasn't that involved with the backdrop, but I can tell you it looked like me. I can tell you that I was, oh man, I was frightened to death. You know what they say? They say old age isn't for sissies. So what happens is I turn 65 as I'm starting to lose my eyesight. Then I'm starting to lose my hearing. I'm looking at this and thinking, oh man, I'm now losing my mind, because that's what you think. You think, how can this have happened and me not remember this? How am I sitting here in a vehicle?
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is... you don't come back from this right here. This is a person who has all this stuff going on. This is what happened, that's what happened. But she blanks out and has no memory about why she was in the van at the location where her husband's life was taken. And notice this too. So this is usually what these types do when they're backed into the corner like this. This has been my experience. They start crying, number one, because the tears shield people away. So the crying comes first to try and get their way or whatever. That Nancy's the type that has a cute little story to tell. They say that old age ain't for sissies, and it's like she goes into this whole tangent here over a simple question, right? Which is, there's a picture of you at the crime scene. When it happened? What do we do about this? There's nothing you can say to that except, my mind's going a blank.
Yeah. Oh, just weird shit.
Again, a little slip of the real Nancy. Now, I cuss like a sailor most of the time, I'm not going to lie. But to see her here on the stand and just talking, yeah, just weirdish, where I'm just like, yeah, this is, again, this little mask comes off to the real Nancy of, it's not portraying the image that she wants, right? Like, she's trying to get up there and play this innocent little grandmother when it's, I get Ma Fratelli off of her, the woman from Goonies, remember her? That's the kind of energy that I really think that she's more about on a daily basis. So, and I think that's what her name was in the movie. That's the vibe I think she gives more, not this like little, I wear a cute little scarf and say cute little things and I don't cuss or do anything like that. No, this is far from the truth.
It just, everything, when I went through the house, every room was memories. And they were all good memories, but they were all sad memories at this point because Dan wasn't there.
Again, unfortunately, that's real sad and everything, but maybe you shouldn't have taken his life. That's the easy answer to this, right? But again, this is very performative. She needs to do this part, hoping that her audience will buy it in.
People have testified in this court that you didn't display the appropriate grief.
Yeah.
How do you feel about public grief?
I hate public grief.
Now, again, the irony from Miss Irony herself is she's going to sit here and talk about public grief and crying in public when she's up here not showing any signs of that, openly weeping and crying and not trying to hide this. Not at all the kind of behavior we would see from somebody who wants to suck that in. She wants the audience to see her cry. She wants the audience to see her grieve, but yet she has an excuse as to why she didn't act that way in other times, because that's probably the real Nancy. Again, this is all performative and her real mask comes off during this.
I don't even like crying when I'm alone. I think crying is so worthless. It doesn't accomplish anything.
But yet she'll sit here on the stand and cry at the appropriate times, not covering her face, not covering her eyes, not trying to withhold it back, doing all that she can for everybody to see her crocodile tears. Okay, next.
You prepared to get that house sold quickly, is that
I
right?
did.
Why is that?
Oh, okay, so I've got all these deaths going on around me, and then I get the cheery little news that I'm not on the note, and Wells Fargo can, whether I'm behind on the payments or not, does not matter. They can foreclose on the property because the note holder is dead. And I'm thinking, oh man.
Again, more excuses for every one of her actions, all the shady stuff. Tries to get this house sold right away, insurance policy, you name it, and of course she has an excuse for it.
What about some of the other things like cooking things and utensils and things like that? His multiples of tongs and...
We had enough friends who were foodies or cookers or chefs or what have you, that a lot of that stuff I was able to give to people who I knew would use it. But some stuff, we gave to Nathaniel specifically because we knew that he also loved to cook and there would be things he would like.
Who's we?
Dan and me. Sorry, he's not here. I'm sorry.
Now, of course, she's going to go into all the wonderful things that they did, all the charitable stuff that she gave away to people and whatnot, and then she goes into this. And again, it's a wonderful time to sit here and play the game of, Daniel and me, he's not here, and go into this, again, coming from someone who doesn't want to publicly grieve or cry, but she's able to do this completely on the stand for everybody. Got it.
The police found the gun kit in storage,
They did.
marked GK.
I packed that box.
You gave them the gun, the Glock 17.
I did.
That had the little zip tied through it.
Right?
But there isn't a slide in evidence. You know where that slide is?
On the day I was arrested, if they had asked me, I would have said it was either in storage or in the house. I hadn't seen it for a while, but I had no idea where it was.
You know where it is now?
No, I would have thought that somebody would have found it.
So here we are trying to come up with an excuse why the most important part of the gun thing and whatever that they need or whatever that I'm sure she has researched and found, let me get rid of this, whatever the case may be, is missing. And so she has everything else nicely organized and all this type of stuff, and the prosecutor will spend a lot of time on the stand ripping this apart because she cannot admit to one thing about this.
Did you kill Dan Brophy?
No, I did not.
So that's how they end that testimony. Now let's listen to some clips. And when we do this, also watch how her demeanor changes. Now, obviously, there's going to be a different vibe. She knows that the state is trying to put her away, right? But look at how different she is, and then look at how her story holds or doesn't hold up.
Didn't your insurance expert testify? Did you hear him testify and say that if you were to take that money out of that policy, that you would have had to forfeit the policy?
If they said that, I didn't understand, but I can tell you this. They have a schedule in the policy that shows what happens if you have this money. For example, if Dan died when he was 78, we didn't get 100,000 back, we got 167,000 back. But if we took the 67,000 out of it, we can continue paying for the policy. Now, that's not to say it was a 20-year term. That's not to say they might not raise the premium on it, but we could continue paying for it.
You disagree with your insurance expert?
I disagree with that aspect if that's what they really said.
Now again, here we go. She probably wasn't listening to him when he was on the damn stand. She was probably busy talking her ass off. I mean, let's just call a spade here. But one thing to notice here, so notice how she's more aggressive, right? Where she's like, well, you know, and knows every last detail to this stuff, right? But then there's other things, again, where it's like, you know all this stuff, but your mind's blank on the morning of where you were when Dan's life was taken and all this. And then I love this state prosecutor because he's very just flat, very boom. It's always like, so you disagree with your expert? She's like, well, what would that, you know, and that's really all she can say to it.
We will have it later on when we need it. If we're just doing a savings account or we're investing in the stock market,
Sure.
I'm not good like that.
But you agree that you treated the forester's policy that also had this savings component. You know, it's forced savings, but you were just taking the money.
I took the money out when we needed it because it was there, you know, because why we had it was for A, retirement, but B, emergencies, and this qualified as an emergency.
Not much of a forced savings, though, if you're just taking the money out, right?
That is true.
So here we see the truth come out. Now remember, she would have had you think that, oh, they do this and they have this account and this policy, they save this and they do that. And he's just bringing all this out, but you're taking money out along the way. Like, you know, okay, so it's not really much of a savings account, is it? Because again, she's trying to play off why they have all these insurance policies, right? We did this one to save money. Oh, we did this one to do that. You know, and it's like, no, that's not the case. You did it to have tons of insurance on each other, and one of you didn't make it out alive.
And when you, 4 days after Dan's murder, you called Detective Posey, is that right?
No. Dan died Saturday morning. I called Monday afternoon.
That's when you called Detective Posey regarding the insurance policy?
Right.
And that
I had done what they had told me. I'd called my insurance companies and started the claim, and that's when we had a conversation, and then I called Holly, and then I called Detective Posey.
Now, as you see, she doesn't make her argument look any better with what she says and tries to correct him. Because, again, these type personalities, narcissistic people, egotistical people, all that, they can never let you have something, right? She can never just say, yep, that's true. She has to rearrange it. She has to try and take ownership of everything, right? So, nope, that's not true. Well, I did this. And, again, the fact that she did all this, the fact that she's calling the cops up this soon saying, I need a letter of exoneration, honey, guilt was eating her up.
We'll break that down. I just want
Sorry.
You're saying that was on the 4th.
I think so. I think it was that Monday.
And if your call records show that it was actually the 6th?
It could have been.
Okay.
You know, the call records are going to be more accurate at this point than I am.
And also on the 6th, you actually, well, during that phone call with Detective Posey, you only disclosed a $40,000 policy.
Yes, but he
Remember
didn't ask me about anything else.
I understand. I don't think he even asked you about that. Isn't it true that you actually just offered that it was
That's
just
true.
a $40,000 policy?
I mean, again, interesting. Who in their right mind would sit here and do this? Calling the police officer up. And notice how her mind works. Well, he didn't ask me about the other ones. And then he corrects her very quickly. Well, he didn't ask you about this one either, and you volunteered that, so why leave the other ones off? Because it makes you look guilty. That's why, Nancy.
The smallest of all of your policies,
No, it wasn't the smallest, but it was a small policy.
besides the Life Map $2,500
Right,
policy.
but it was the smallest.
The only one you
That one.
offered to Detective Posey was the smallest policy.
Yes.
During the same conversation that you're asking him for a letter of exoneration.
Again, the evidence speaks for itself. And this case was such a good lesson, or whatever you want to call it, viewpoint, whatever, and watching the difference between the defense getting up there and throwing these little softballs, and we've really thought this through, and then him getting up here and shredding it down to the reality of it. Days after this happens, you call, you want a letter of exoneration, you only tell him about this low policy, the whole 9 yards. Again, these are very shady actions.
I'm asking to see if that's something that he would have said, oh, sure, we'll do that for you. Or if he said no. I mean, I was prepared for the worst. I was prepared for him to say no.
Sure. Isn't it true that you actually talked to all your insurance companies that day?
I did. And not a one of them asked for that, but Forrester's.
Okay, so you called all your life insurance companies, notified them of Dan's death.
Yes.
One of them asked you for a letter of exoneration. You asked Detective Posey for that.
I asked if it was possible to get that.
If I was her, I would have just been like, forget it. You can keep the 40. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I would have just been like, keep it. You have all these other policies, right? So it's like, just forget it, move on. Like, it wouldn't even be an option, right? It's like you just took the life of your husband, and now you're going to do that. But again, that's where greed got to her, and she wanted that answer. She wanted to know if she was a suspect or not. She was trying to take control of the scenario. Again, these narcissists will always dig their own graves. You just have to sit there long enough and wait for it to happen.
So his ideal situation was that he would have his own tiny house and you would have your own.
No, he would he would have a house for junk, and then he would live in mine where it would be tidy.
Like, nobody was laughing along with her in the courtroom. It's like you could hear a pin drop.
We heard a lot about the yard.
Oh.
A lot about the yard.
Amen, brother. My God, if you watch this, you know. I mean, there's some of this testimony where it's like they have to be sleeping. They have to be like sitting there with little like toothpicks on their eyes to keep it up like they did in the cartoons back in the day. I love the fact that he slides in these like little quips. Like, we heard a lot about the yard. A lot about the yard. Just like, my God, yes, please make it end.
We got a little conflicting information
Okay.
about who actually cleaned it.
Yes. I heard that myself.
What do you have to say about that?
That's just one of the many conflicting statements on here. But again, the fact that she's just going to giggle and laugh and whatnot about it. And it's just like, again, loves the attention. Loves the attention.
Yeah, James Denny did the heavy duty work. Trust me, he had the tractor, he did the heavy duty work. But Susan and her boyfriend did a lot. They called it something else, but I thought it was a ditch witch. And they pulled up a lot of the blackberries. So it was a combination effort that everybody's laying claim to, and I don't care. Fine. As long as it got done, I didn't need to, I could have handed out ribbons. You got this, you got that, but that was just sarcastic. Ignore that. What I would really say is,
Again, the real Nancy's slipping out. That was just sarcastic. Ignore that. She, again, could not wait to sit here and put everyone in their place of, we'll give you a ribbon and you a this. I mean, come on, honey. Who do you think you are? I mean, that's the thing that just blows my mind. But this is what the prosecution does so well. Just let her talk. Let her dig her own grave with this. She is not a likable person, and you can get that off of this. Here's the thing. Narcissists do well and very quick superficial type things. So when they're on a stand like this for hours and hours and hours, you can't help but you can't help but notice their real personality, number one. But number two, through the evidence, you can start seeing where it's like, well, this doesn't make sense, because they usually have all these plates spinning, right, to make their lives function as whatever. They have all these different plates spinning, and it is what it is. And these are her plates spinning, and this is her real personality.
Is there anything that you did yourself in the community? Well, let me ask you this. Did you think that you were held in high regards in the community as well?
Yes, but not in the same way.
Did that make you jealous?
Oh, no. Oh, no. That made me proud that we were a couple who went together. There was no jealousy there.
Now, as the son will say in his victim impact statement, she always lived in the shadows of his father, and that much is very true. And I love that the prosecutor will sit here and dig into these little open wounds of Nancy's like that, because she was jealous, but she also basked in whatever limelight he had, because she had none herself.
In the morning that Dan died, you expected him to have a cup of his tea.
I did.
You told that to the police?
I did.
That was true.
Yes.
Carried it pretty much in the same cup?
Yes. We had a number of those cups. He could change them out.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but the idea that somebody had maybe gone to Starbucks that morning, maybe not, I don't know. Do you recall back, did you have a Starbucks at any time that morning?
I did.
Just don't know how you got it.
It was part of my routine. That's all I can tell you. I don't remember it. I just know that it was part of my routine.
Could Dan have brought it to you?
So again, this goes to show toward the aspect of anything that revolves around her having left the house that morning and doing that, no memory. It was just part of my routine that I had when I don't know how I got it.
You're saying you bought this gun kit as a research. When did that story start in your head?
It came together when I read that story. When I read that article in the paper about this guy, and all of a sudden I knew how I could twist it and make it into a story. Ideas come, out of the blue, and
Again, he just lets her talk herself down into her own grave. This is when she came up with how she could take Dan's life. End of damn story.
when they come sailing by, you write them down so you don't forget them. And then sometimes you act on them.
And that was November of 2017?
November, sometime in November
That you
of
read-
17.
You read the article, started doing research.
Mm-hmm.
And you visited the Ghost Guns website several times without purchasing anything.
That's true.
And what were you searching for on the Ghost Guns website?
Research.
So one time I was at Walmart and I, for whatever reason, I don't know why I couldn't figure this out or whatever, but it was a new Walmart, but I needed to find out where the bread was, right? I was like, where is the damn bread? And so I stopped this girl and we were in like the home section and I was like, where is the bread? And she was like, in the bread aisle, and bothered that I'd even asked her, for something. So that was always an ongoing joke after that, like when you just don't care, like, oh, where's the bread? In the bread aisle? Oh, thank you. This right here was Nancy's version of that. So you were going onto this website to do all this research. What were you researching? Research. Thank you, Nancy.
If I had thought, hey, chickens would be fun, we would have had a plan, build it as you go plan. He was just a planner and I was not.
So were you researching for a book or not?
I'm sorry, did I go off target there? I was researching for a book, but I wasn't researching beyond here.
Okay, now here she admits, this is where we see, Dan would have done all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but I wasn't a planner. The real Nancy comes out, right? This is the real Nancy. So already it's, okay, so were you researching or not then? Because you're not a planner, but look at all the planning she did with the insurance and the this and the that and the da-da-da-da-da. It just doesn't add up, Nancy.
But you stated that Karen called you before you went into that interview.
Yes,
Dan's mother, Karen.
yes,
And that you told her that it was Dan and that he was dead.
yes,
Based on the fact that you thought that Dan had been killed?
It was more than think.
But you hadn't been told.
I had not been told, but
So as you see, we're on another day of testimony, and it just keeps getting worse. Who does that, right? Well, the person who took his life is that, right? Again, she can't help herself, right? I mean, this evidence, it's why she's convicted.
Stated you bought this ghost gun build kit and you realized you couldn't put it together.
no, I realized it was more intricate. I didn't realize I couldn't put it together. It was more intricate than I had thought it would be,
Okay, and based on what?
based upon the fact that it was supposed to be few parts, and I thought it was a few too many parts.
What steps did you take to actually try to build it?
I didn't take any because I wasn't ready to write that story yet.
You decided to write that story months prior.
Yes?
Now, again, if you look at her, number one, she's very uncomfortable. She's situating herself. And this day's testimony, she's way more flat. She has an edge to her. And also during this, we hear more like, oh, I didn't write the story yet, but you started researching for it like months earlier. You know, nothing really adds up with her. And then also notice how she takes control of the thing. Well, it was, you didn't put it together because it was too difficult. No, it wasn't too difficult. Again, it was, there's too many steps. But it wasn't what you said. It's the way I say it. Just a narcissist, and that's all.
But you weren't ready to start writing it.
That's right.
So what was the need to buy the gun at that point?
I was celebrating it was Christmas.
I mean, again, I was celebrating it was Christmas. You know, now she did say, oh, this is my present to myself, but, I mean, come on.
Right. But what was the need to buy the gun if you weren't writing the story yet?
Mr. Overstreet, we have had testimony upon testimony upon testimony about the fact Dan was a collector. Dan wasn't a collector by himself. I had my little piles of stuff. You know, what I have found in life is if you see something you want it, you can afford it, buy it now, because circling back for it, it may or may not be there.
And so now you're a gun collector?
No. Now I have a piece of writing information research.
Again, she tries to walk herself out of this with her stupid little stories and her stupid little cutesy, quippy things, and it doesn't make sense. So now you're a gun collector. No, I collect writing stuff that all happens to be guns right now that you're not writing a story about. Gotcha, Nancy.
And once again, I go back to I don't know, because there are a slew of parts, you know. The only thing I can attribute it to is when you buy an IKEA thing, there are pieces that come fairly close together. And that isn't where you celebrate. You celebrate the little bags of all, you don't celebrate the little bag. Let me say this sentence again where it makes sense. You're delighted to see pieces more or less together. All the little parts, you're less delighted to see.
And is this why you never even opened these little baggies?
I wasn't ready to start yet, and I didn't want them misplaced.
Okay. And so you made no attempts to try to build it. You didn't do any further research because you weren't ready to write this story?
That's right.
Thank you.
So here we see the gun kit, right? And we hear another one of her stupid little, you know, she's trying to say something way more difficult than it needs to be said. You know, it had too many parts to it. You know, she can't even keep her story straight with it. Like, well, let me re-say this. You know, you celebrate over this and you da-da-da-da. Dropped the act, Nancy. No one is buying it. It's obnoxious. You're taking taxpayers' dollars. Just say the answer and move the hell on.
Well, Ms. Brophy, I appreciate a meme as well and what other people's opinions might be, but I'm asking your position as somebody who was so anti-gun, in fact, that your law enforcement husband wasn't allowed to have a gun in the house.
No,
Hang on.
sorry.
So anti-gun, but your response to gun violence increasing in this country was to buy a gun yourself. Yes or no?
Yes, with a caveat.
Then she starts in with this. She'll say an answer, but with a caveat. And you're like, oh my God, if we hear that word again. Rabbit hole and caveat. I mean, that should be the name of this damn video.
Is there anything else you've got that could help us? And that would have included the gun kit.
Let's
You
make
know?
this easier. What is the relevance of this gun kit to the police?
None, but we had it. You know, I figured they'd ask for it sooner or later.
Why would the police ask you for a gun kit that they don't know that you own?
So this is in reference to why she marked the gun kit as gun kit when she put it away, and she's claiming it was for the police because she figured they would want it and all this, and she doesn't see. This is not a normal train of thought for somebody who didn't use that, as part of the process in taking their husband's life, right? But she has tried to control the narrative and the story from so far long ago that she can't see the forest through the trees. Okay.
I sort of figured the police had more experience and they were the ones in charge.
So you think you have relevant evidence to a murder investigation, and you don't think you should mention it to the police?
How does a gun kit, even though I marked it, how is a gun kit relative evidence?
I'm asking you.
I'm asking you because I don't think it is, because it's never been put together.
Then why would you mark it for the police?
Because I figured the police would come back and want to know.
This is we're circling logic here. You see how this is going for her, right? It doesn't make sense. This is where, again, it's falling apart, Nancy. If it wasn't already falling apart, it's falling apart. But this is how she works. And again, if you notice this, if you've dealt with people like this in your life, they don't do well when you confront them because they talk in circles and they're used to exhausting people and people moving along. And, obviously, thank God it didn't work out for her in this scenario, right? But at least the jury is able to see this, how it doesn't make sense. She was trying to cover all of her bases is what it was.
I think that's how they did it, but, it were the two computers.
Why did you get a new computer in March of 2018?
When you open the computer, the old computer, you can't read the screen because it's become lines across it.
So you did all your research of all these guns on one computer, then packed that away and put it in a box in the closet, and then you got a new computer. Is that right?
I get a new computer every year.
How convenient. And again, she has excuses for all of this. If you look at the evidence, and even though she has told a story from start to finish for each bit of this, it's very shady. And again, you can't unring the bell of the physical evidence. This blows my mind when people decide to take someone else's life and they pre-plan it to this degree and they don't calculate that there are cameras everywhere you go. You are being recorded constantly. If you wanted to live off the grid, you would have to start from birth with never being on like a social security, all this kind of card and all that kind of stuff, and living literally somewhere deep in the mountains because you are being watched anywhere you are.
And you paid cash for that gun?
Yes, we did.
Your attorney made a big deal out of you purchasing things with your debit card or credit card.
Right?
Why would you pay cash at the gun show?
Well, actually, that was Stan's idea. And when we talked about it and what have you, he said, here's $400 in cash. You get cash from your thing. So I went on Dan's idea on that.
Didn't you actually withdraw the $400?
I withdrew the $400, but he gave me $400 in addition, and he gave me cash.
So she goes to the gun show to pay cash for the gun. Again, this is just, it doesn't make sense. And the fact that she tries to make it make sense is comical.
Did you ever remove the slide and barrel?
Oh, sure, I played with it.
Oh, you did remove the slide and barrel?
Sure.
Oh.
I didn't think that was a secret.
Well, you didn't tell the police that.
The police didn't ask me whether I'd removed the sliding barrel.
You told the police that you got it home and that you realized how much you didn't want it and you put it away and never touched it again. Do you remember that?
I could have said that, but I was upset at the time, so that was probably an exaggeration.
Again, we see more evidence from her own mouth that I will admit things and not be forthcoming with information if I'm not asked about it. And she tries a lot to blame it on the police's, ineptness and all that kind of stuff. Well, they didn't ask. Well, I figured they would have looked. Well, I figured this or that. Gotcha, Nancy.
I didn't, I touched the gun.
Yeah. And so your testimony today, after hearing all the testimony and seeing all the evidence on the screen, your testimony today is that you have removed that slide and barrel.
I have.
So you know how to do it.
Yeah.
It's not that hard, right?
Oh, it's terribly hard. I broke 2 nails doing it. Don't believe them when they say it's not that hard. You can't just whip it off the way they do it. You have to hold the gun a certain way. You have to pull it back. I broke 2 nails pulling it back, and I thought, this isn't any fun. And you would be shocked at how hard it is to do.
Again, this is an example of how she tries to take ownership of something. It's almost like, no, just admit to it. Oh, no, I took it off. I broke 2 nails. Don't let them tell you this, Sonny. You know, she's trying to own this as much as she can. But again, you just can't own the fact, like, it's gone. You meticulously stored everything away, but this one thing is missing, right? It's insane that she tries to play this off, but it's also so psychologically interesting to watch how she tries to manipulate and steer this testimony and the questioning and the ownership over it when she is out of control with it.
You can see that it's nearly identical to the ghost gun slide and barrel, correct?
I'd have to look at both of them now, but I would say yes.
Let's do that.
Oh, yeah, we can look at, okay.
So in this, she's going to try and sit here and say that the 2 guns are not identical, and yes, one is a little bit shorter. But notice how she says, okay, yeah, we can do that. Again, it's just taking ownership of everything. Like, he's going to do it. He doesn't need your permission, honey. You know what I'm saying? Like, he doesn't need you to say that we can do this. You're going to. He's doing it. So again, and this might be like a little, petty on my part to pick this out, but imagine this in everyday conversation and everyday interactions. This kind of personality where you're not on the stand fighting for your life. You can only imagine, like I said, what Dan must have gone through on a daily basis with her.
Agree that these look nearly identical.
I would agree that they look identical, but they obviously are not.
There you go. So she's not going to let them have that. She's not going to admit to that. She is going to pick it apart because she has to control the narrative. It doesn't matter what. That is her main focus. It doesn't matter what's going on. She's going to be difficult, basically.
But you chose to buy the exact same piece. Is that right?
Yes, but I have a caveat on that too.
Of course. Go ahead.
He had to get sick of it. Anytime she's pressed for this kind of, but you did this. Yes, but with a caveat. Again, we are disowning that word after this trial, y'all.
Your Honor, at this point, if counsel's going to be aggressive, I would ask that he not have a gun.
What the difference is.
I mean, my God, even the defense is dramatic. I'm just like, are you serious? Like, Nancy's the one up here that we need to be nervous about holding the gun, okay? Like, I don't think that the counsel is going to be coming after the damn client or do anything crazy with the gun, okay? Let's just put the dramatics down.
Not being able to locate that and that being the allegation that was the murder weapon?
I see nothing ironic about this case at all. I see nothing happy about this case at all.
She's going to try and take the high road here. I don't see anything ironic or happy about this case. Yeah, no duh, Nancy. Okay, we know that. We get that, right? You're the one who took your husband's life. Okay, it's just absolutely crazy. And part of me, Roscoe, is crying to come up here. He says hello. He doesn't like Nancy either.
Yeah.
No, but we work together on different things. If he had a class outside of OCI, for example, I might take things down to him. I took things down to OCI for Dan 3 to 4 times a month because he would get to school and realize he had left something. So we worked together in terms of doing things, but not necessarily on projects.
Right.
Am I being clear?
Not really.
Okay, good.
So when you...
I just had to put that up there. I swear I love this guy. Am I being clear? Not really. Okay. I mean, it's just, if it could sum up her testimony, it would be that right there. I'm just like, oh my God, she has talked herself into such circles. I mean, the judge is probably like, I hope they saged the damn courtroom when it was over with. I mean, come on.
You're not challenging that. You're agreeing that is you.
We have more things to challenge than me driving around in this case.
You would agree that you're driving around and in front of the Culinary Institute at the exact time that Dan is being murdered?
Yeah, we do have a lot of other things to challenge, Nancy. You can't get out of that testimony, though. Yeah, evidence. I mean, I'm sorry. You can't get away from that. I mean, it's there. It's crystal clear. But again, a narcissist is going to narcissist, and she is not going to admit to that. All you can do in this moment is to say that you forget, or that you've gone, you disassociated something. But you can't admit to that, right? There's nothing you can say.
No, actually, I don't agree with that. I was driving around for a full hour before Dan got murdered. I was down there before Dan ever got to school. I was driving around writing for a full hour. I was only in that vicinity for 6 minutes, and I don't know that Dan was murdered in that 6 minutes.
Now pay close attention to this, because this is where her whole story begins to unravel on the stand in front of us.
We agree that he was murdered in that time frame, but in terms of when he arrived and shortly thereafter, but whether it was not in that 6 minutes or not, I don't know.
I'm sorry, did you just say that you were driving around writing?
Yes, that's what I was doing, was driving around writing. I testified to that yesterday, that I would find a place to park and I'd jot down ideas.
I thought you didn't know that you were driving.
Oh, Nancy, and this again is why it worked in the favor of everyone to let her just keep talking, because this is what happens. She just tells on herself, right? And so let's see what else she has to say about that.
Yesterday, what I testified for was that when I was sitting in there, I could remember being in the parking lot writing. Didn't I say that yesterday?
No.
Okay.
So let's go back over this.
Okay, let's go back.
Oh, she's upset with herself at this point. Oh my God, I can't believe this. But again, she tells on herself, right? I mean, at 1 second it says, I don't remember, I disassociated, but I remember all this over here. It's very obvious that what's going on really is just lying. And this would go on and on and on. So what I want to do now is jump toward the end. I want to look at some clips from the closing arguments, specifically from the prosecutor.
Now, when I say they're taking little bits and pieces from their history within the past year, let's say, and then they're building a story around it for you.
And that's exactly the best way to sum up Nancy and her time on the stand and her defense's whole theory with everything. They're taking little bits and pieces, and they have made this huge, convoluted, false story around it.
Now, what did they tell you about this plan? Well, they said a lot, but what became clear is it's clearly a plan that was concocted for you. This wasn't something that they talked with family and friends about.
Now, this is in relation to all these retirement plans and this and that, and oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. He's sitting here saying nobody else knew about this, right? And at this point, obviously, Dan can't speak for himself, so only Nancy knew about this. No one else had heard about this stuff.
They maybe mentioned the idea of the thought of selling their house. But remember what Matt Gitchell said about the retirement plan? It was like throwing darts at a map. It was all talk. They just ideas that they had for the future, as most people probably do. Even younger than the Brophies. They talk about their future. But there was no concrete plan, as defense would have you believe.
And again, if you're in this scenario, if you're with somebody or even yourself, you're usually thinking along the way of, well, I'll do this or I'll do that or we could do this. And so this is what I do believe has happened, is that Nancy has gone over these things like that and made it more than it was to try and obviously lessen her guilt in the situation and to come up with this concocted story as to how everything made sense to arrive at where they're at, except for the fact that she did it.
And they point to that to say, well, because of this retirement plan that they have, that means they don't have any financial struggles. And so why would she need to kill Dan? It's really the only thing that defense can point to say, well, there's no need. But you have to remember, nobody knew about it. They just created this for you.
And again, I think that's what was being banked on by Nancy, is spinning this whole thing about we have this savings and that and to create this illusion of, well, there's no need to do this. You know, it would be better for her if he was alive and an income or this or that or the other. Greed has no boundaries. Greed has no limits for those who are willing to go to these measures to get what they want.
But the problem with that is Dan clearly had no intentions of retiring, as we've very well established. Dan wasn't going along with this plan. Doesn't appear that he knew about any plan that they were retiring.
And herein lies more of the truth. Most likely, Dan does not sound to me like somebody who was going to be going along with this and, oh yeah, well, we'll do this and that. Now, from the sounds of it, Nancy was. She wanted to sit around and do nothing and write these stupid little books that she was writing, right? And so she wanted to find any way to do that possible. I think if Dan was here and he could speak for himself, which again, she took that ability away from him, he would be shaking his head in disbelief as to the monster who he was living with.
In fact, the only two people that you heard from that mentioned an actual plan, Dan retiring at 68 or 70, what the plan was moving forward, you heard from two people that told you there was a plan. Do you remember who those were? They were two defense experts. Not friends, not family. Two paid defense experts that got all of their information from the defense.
And remember, we talked about this earlier. And he summed it up very beautifully here. I mean, again, you can't, whether it's for the defense, the state, whatever, these paid-for experts, you can't trust them. And especially a scenario like this, where nobody's able to testify about this. Look at these other trials, like the Rosenbaums and people like that, who, Jennifer Rosenbaum, she had, the mailman was her only character witness. I mean, this speaks volumes, right, about this kind of people when they do these things and they can't get anyone to really back up their information or anything like that. And this is another classic case of this.
Nancy cannot help herself but to develop stories to explain why she does what she does. And if you notice, she sprinkles those lies among people.
He is summing her up completely. This is exactly what she's done. She's made up stories to go along with what she's done, right? There's a lot of stories she's made up. And then, just like any other narcissist, everyone knows a little bit of Nancy. Everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different truth. If you get all the people in the same room with a narcissist, they'll all compare notes. It's over for them, right? Because that's what they do. They spin plates everywhere.
Dr. Warford, although she opined that Nancy was forthcoming, she said that. She then later says in the same evaluation that Nancy Brophy won't even admit her shortcomings, basic shortcomings. Nancy wants to always look good.
Again, if you've dealt with people like Nancy in your lifetime, of course they're not going to admit basic shortcomings. They never do this. They are concerned about always winning and coming on top, and she proved that during this. This happened during the trial, on the stand for everyone to see.
Nancy Brophy, the reality is she was not planning a retirement in early 2018. She was planning a murder.
Amen. Swing the damn gavel, call it good.
Just look at that timeline. And look at that black bar right in the middle of the timeline heading from left to right. That's the time that Nancy doesn't remember, so she says. That morning she gets up in a scene on video, driving around downtown. She doesn't remember that. She drives back home. She's seen by the neighbors. She doesn't remember that. All the way up to the point, of course, when she remembers the call from Maxine Bourjarding, which again, inconsequential facts. That's why she's able to remember them.
And exactly. You can't get around this. She is claiming that she doesn't remember this, but she does remember riding in the car that morning, right? She literally is saying that she has blacked out during the most crucial part of it, right? You're just never going to get around that.
Nancy suffers not from retrograde amnesia or anterograde amnesia. Nancy suffers from convenient amnesia.
I want to look that up. That has to be a legitimate diagnosis because it's so common in these cases.
Nancy murdered Dan Brophy on a day he would be alone, in a place where there are no cameras, in a place that would pay the most money upon his death.
End of damn story. Carter out to old Sparky. Now we are going to listen to a victim impact statement from his son. Y'all, this is beautifully written. Nancy would only hope that she could write as beautiful as the son. I'm not sure if he's a writer or not, but it was, I've never heard a victim impact statement like this, where he gave her a proper reading, and that is old school for summing her up and breaking her down and doing right by his father's name. And so let's look at some highlights of that.
The years of deceit have spanned decades. From learning that your solution to my father being married to my mother was, I can fix that, to years of payroll and tax fraud that you waged on your employees. You've always thought you were one step ahead.
Again, grifter is going to grift, a narcissist is going to narcissist. All this information that he's just spilling about her, and the look in his eye towards her, like, I mean, he loathes this woman. And just listen to her. She's a grifter. That's all she is, and she grifted his father.
Your largest financial contribution in the latter years was sending my father off to work an extra job so you could continue to pretend to be an author.
Girl, that one cut to the damn bone on her. I can tell you that. But again, you see this so many times where it's like, you know, the entitlement of these type people of, well, you go out and do everything. I'll sit here and play right. You know what I mean? It blows my mind.
My father possessed more knowledge, depth, accomplishments, recognition, and joy in life than a person as shallow and self-serving as yourself are capable of.
I mean, God, have you ever wanted to say this stuff to a person like her that you've encountered in your lifetime? I mean, he cuts right through and hits every button on her, I'm sure. So sad to see that this is what the family thought of her, right? And not saying that about them, but the fact that she was able to infiltrate her way into this nice family and take advantage of and then ultimately take the life of the father, when behind the scenes it sounds like the family knew, like, this woman is pure trash.
Instead of rising to the occasion, facing life's challenges head on, and contributing in a meaningful way, you opted to lie, steal, cheat, defraud, and ultimately kill the man that was, for some reason still unbeknownst to me, your biggest fan.
I mean, my God, who knows what spell she had on the man, right? And you can see his son just, I mean, I have no idea why he was your biggest fan. And to think that that's the thanks that she gave him just runs all over me.
I would suggest you be ashamed of your actions, but that would presuppose you possess the ability to think of anyone besides yourself.
And sadly, Nancy will never be able to think of anyone beside herself, because that would require introspection, taking accountability, and these are things that Nancy absolutely does not have. Now, fortunately for society and everybody else, most likely she will never be walking out of a prison due to her age, her sentencing, and all of that, which is good for everybody here. This is a great example of watching someone on the stand bury themselves, and probably has been doing this over the years, because clearly she didn't have any fans amongst the family, right? I mean, this is somebody who left a trail of destruction in their lifetime, and this is what narcissists do. This is just how they operate on a daily basis. Now, if you want to see another trial, another interesting one where we're actually watching a narcissist continue to victimize his victim on the stand, then go ahead and click this video and see what I have to say about the Trevor Summers trial.